The sound comes first, not music, not thunder, just the steady, broken rhythm of dying machines. Metal screams through the void as torn warships drift past me, gutted and hollow, their twisted frames glowing with fire that refuses to die. Each explosion is too close, too loud, a reminder that no matter how far we push into the darkness, the war follows. I can still hear the comms chatter, fragments of voices cut off by static, begging for help that will never come. Engine failure, we're hit, no escape pods. Then silence, always silence. That's the sound of this war. Not victory, not defeat, just the crushing silence after the screaming stops. I've lost count of how many battles we've fought, how many planets we've scorched. They blur together, each one leaving fewer of us alive to remember it. But this battle, this massacre, was different, because it was here, among the wreckage of our so-called triumphs, that I first saw her. But before I explain how it came to this chaos, you need to know where it began. It started with orders, as it always does. Deploy to Sector Keva, they told us. Another front line, another nameless star system turned into a graveyard. Command said we were liberators, that the aliens we were fighting were savages who struck first, who wanted to wipe out humanity. We believed them because we had to. Belief was the only thing that made the slaughter tolerable. They didn't look like us. That much was true. The first time I saw one alive, really alive, not just burnt flesh in a crash transport, it shook me. Their forms were tall, angular, each movement sharp and deliberate, like blades given flesh. Their skin shimmered with a texture I can only describe as living metal, reflecting light in jagged patterns that made my eyes ache. Their eyes were the worst. No pupils, no whites, just glowing voids that stared through you like glass over a grave. We called them monsters. It was easier that way. Monsters don't bleed like us. Monsters don't cry out when their bodies break. But in truth, they did. And that sound haunted me more than the silence of space. The planet we were sent to wasn't remarkable, a dead world stripped of its atmosphere centuries ago. Its surface was nothing but fractured stone and skeletal ridges of black rock. Yet both sides fought like it was sacred ground. For resources, for strategy, for pride. It didn't matter. Command wanted it, so we bled for it. I was with the 12th Infantry, crawling through trenches carved into volcanic ash. The air was poisonous, thick with toxic fumes from ruptured vents, so we wore masks that made every breath a struggle. Around us, the world shook with artillery fire. The sky, not that it mattered, was hidden by the glow of orbital bombardments. Forward! Push forward! The order barked through our helmets, and like the obedient cattle we were, we climbed over the lip of the trench and into hell. I remember the ground shaking as plasma rounds hammered into the dirt, burning through men before they could scream. I remember the sickening smell of scorched flesh mixed with the acrid smoke of burning stone. I remember watching comrades I'd trained with for years vanish in bursts of fire, reduced to ash before their names even left my lips. Private Torres, just 19 years old, still carried pictures of his girlfriend from Earth, stepped on what looked like a Kithaeron mine. The explosion vaporized him from the waist down, but he lived long enough to look at his missing legs with confused, terrified eyes before shock took him. Sergeant Kim tried to provide covering fire and took a plasma bolt through her faceplate. The energy cooked her brain in her helmet, and she kept firing her weapon for another 30 seconds before her nervous system figured out she was dead. And then, I saw her. Not as she would be later. Not as the one who saved me, but as my enemy, my target. She stood among the alien ranks, her movements precise, her weapon an extension of her body. Every strike was calculated, every shot deliberate. Where others fought with rage, she fought with control. Her armor was different from the standard Kithaeron gear, more ornate, marked with symbols that seemed to shift in my peripheral vision. A commander, I realized, someone important. And yet, when our eyes locked across that burning battlefield, something faltered. She had me in her sights, I had her in mine, and neither of us fired. The moment stretched impossibly long, Around us the battle raged, men dying, aliens falling, the earth itself burning under the weight of our mutual hatred. But in that bubble of hesitation, it was just us. Two soldiers recognized something in each other that we weren't supposed to see. I told myself it was a chance, a flicker of hesitation in the chaos. But deep down, I knew it was something else. That night, after the battle broke and the survivors limped back to the trenches, I lay awake listening to the broken whine of the machines keeping us alive. The faces of the dead pressed against my mind, refusing to fade. Torres, still looking confused as he bled out. Kim, firing at nothing with dead eyes. Collins, who'd been incinerated so completely that we'd found only his dog tags, fused to a piece of melted rock. And yet, it wasn't them I saw when I closed my eyes. It was her, the enemy, the one who spared me, or perhaps the one I spared. We were told to forget, to focus on the mission, on survival, on obedience. But war has a way of planting seeds you don't want, thoughts that fester in the cracks of your certainty. And once the seed takes root, there's no tearing it out. The medics came around that night, dispensing stimulants and trauma suppressants, little blue pills that were supposed to keep us functional, keep us from thinking too hard about what we'd seen. Most of the squad took them gratefully. I palmed mine and threw them away later. I wanted to remember, needed to remember, because forgetting felt like betraying everyone who died that day. That was the beginning of everything, not the battle itself, not the orders, not the lies they fed us. It was that moment of hesitation when in the middle of slaughter, I saw an enemy who looked at me not as prey or target, but as something else, something human, and it terrified me more than the war ever had. If you're wondering how I survived long enough to tell this, it wasn't by choice. Survival here feels less like a gift and more like punishment, because every battle that followed only pushed us closer to truths I wasn't ready to face. But I'll tell you anyway, because if I don't, then her death, her sacrifice, means nothing. And if this war has taught me anything, it's that meaning is the only thing they can't burn away. The war didn't stop because I'd seen her face. If anything, it got worse. Command pulled us off that dead rock after 3 days of pointless slaughter and shipped us to Nexus Station for what they called tactical reassessment. What it really was propaganda. They lined us up in the mess hall, what was left of us anyway, and showed us footage of alien attacks on civilian transports, families torn apart, children who would never see their parents again. The works. "Remember why we fight," Colonel Brass told us, his voice echoing off the metal walls. Behind him, the screen showed Kitharon warriors moving through a human settlement, their weapons cutting down anyone who ran. These creatures don't understand mercy. They don't understand peace. They only understand death. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly it hurt, because believing would have made everything simple again. But every time they showed us those images of alien brutality, I kept thinking about her eyes, the way she'd looked at me across that battlefield, not with hatred or bloodlust, but with something almost like recognition. The footage was real, I was sure of that, but something about it felt wrong. Too clean, too convenient. The angles were perfect, the atrocities too visible, too well documented, like it had been filmed specifically for propaganda purposes. I wasn't the only one having doubts. You could see it in the way conversations died when officers approached, in the increasing number of accidental weapon malfunctions during drills, in the hollow way men stared at their food, pushing it around their plates without eating. The 12th Infantry had lost 60% of its strength in that last engagement. Command filled our ranks with fresh recruits, kids barely out of training, their eyes still bright with patriotic fervor and unshakable faith in the righteousness of our cause. They made the rest of us feel ancient by comparison. Private Jackson was one of them, 18 years old, from some farming colony in the Outer Rim. He'd enlisted the day he turned of age, convinced he was going to save humanity from the alien menace. When he found out I'd actually fought the Kitharon face to face, he peppered me with questions. What are they really like, Sergeant? Are they as savage as they say? Do they really eat human flesh? I didn't know how to answer him. How do you explain that the enemy looks back at you with something that might be understanding? How do you tell a kid that the monsters he's been trained to kill might not be monsters at all? They're soldiers, Jackson, just like us. But they started this war. They attacked our colonies first. Did they? I asked, more to myself than to him. The next deployment came 2 weeks later. Another system, another planet, another excuse to kill each other. This time it was Vorthak Prime, a mining world with crystalline formations that supposedly had strategic value. The brass didn't care about strategy though, they cared about body counts. Intelligence reports significant enemy presence, our new lieutenant briefed us. Martinez was his name, fresh out of the academy, with that eager gleam in his eyes that meant he'd never watched a friend die. We're to establish a perimeter and hold until reinforcements arrive. What he didn't tell us was that the aliens, the Kitharon, they called themselves, though I wouldn't learn that until much later, had been using those crystal formations for something we couldn't understand. The crystals hummed with an energy that made your teeth ache and your vision blur. Some of the men said they could hear voices humming, alien voices singing songs that predated human civilization. I thought they were losing their minds until I heard it too. The sound wasn't quite music, wasn't quite speech. It was something between the two, something that bypassed your ears and spoke directly to whatever part of your brain processes emotion. When the wind blew through the crystal formations, the entire landscape sang. Harmonies layered on harmonies, building to crescendos that made your chest tight with inexplicable sadness. "It's like they're mourning," Private Jackson said during our first night on the planet. We were huddled in a forward observation post, listening to the alien song echoing across the crystalline plains. "Mourning what?" I asked. "I don't know. Everything?" The attack came at dawn, if you could call it dawn on a world with 3 suns. Their ships moved like liquid shadows across the orange sky, weapons firing in patterns too precise to be random. But what struck me wasn't their tactics, it was their restraint. Every shot was calculated to disable, not destroy. They were trying to take prisoners. That's when I realized something that chilled me to the bone. We were the only ones trying to commit genocide. Our orders were simple: eliminate all hostile forces, secure the crystal formations, prepare for mining operations. No mention of prisoners, no discussion of non-combatants. Just kill everything that moved and strip the planet bare. The Kitharon, on the other hand, seemed to be fighting a completely different war. They targeted our weapons, our vehicles, our communications equipment. When they had clear shots at human soldiers, they took them, but they aimed for limbs, for non-lethal areas. They were trying to incapacitate, not exterminate. I spotted her during the 3rd wave of their assault. She was leading a squad of Kitharon warriors through the crystal maze, her movements as fluid and precise as I remembered. Her armor had changed, darker now, marked with symbols that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. But her eyes were the same. This time, when our gazes met across the battlefield, she didn't hesitate. She raised her weapon, some kind of energy rifle that hummed like the crystals, and took aim, not at me, but at the heavy plasma cannon my squad was using to cut down her people. The shot was perfect. One pulse of energy and our cannon overloaded, exploding in a shower of sparks and metal. Martinez caught a piece of shrapnel in the throat and went down gurgling. But she could have killed all of us just as easily. Instead, she'd chosen to neutralize a threat without unnecessary casualties. I was starting to understand that everything we'd been told about these creatures was a lie, but the lies ran deeper than I'd imagined. That night, as I helped evacuate our wounded, I overheard a conversation between Lieutenant Martinez, barely alive, speaking through a voice synthesizer they'd jury-rigged to his throat, and Colonel Brass via encrypted comm. "Sir, their tactics are unusual. They seem to be avoiding casualties whenever possible. Lieutenant, you're to report that the enemy fought with typical alien savagery, no mention of restraint." "But sir, that's not what happened." "That's what happened, Lieutenant. Do I make myself clear?" The line went dead. I started paying more attention to the official reports after that. The way they described our engagements bore little resemblance to what I'd actually witnessed. Kitharon attempts to communicate were reported as alien war cries. Their precision strikes against military targets became indiscriminate attacks on human forces. Their efforts to minimize casualties were completely omitted from the record. We were being lied to, not just about the enemy, but about our own actions. The war I was fighting wasn't the war being reported back home. The propaganda machine worked overtime after Vorthak Prime. Every newsfeed, every military briefing, every communication from home painted the Kitharon as soulless monsters bent on human extinction. They showed us captured footage of their rituals, aliens gathered around their crystal formations, voices raised in harmonies that sounded like screaming to human ears. "Look at them," Brass said during another one of his speeches. "Look how they celebrate our losses. Look how they mock our dead." But I've heard those songs up close now. They weren't celebrations. They were mourning songs. The Kitharon were grieving their own losses, same as us. The doubt was spreading through the ranks. Though none of us talked about it openly, you could see it in the way men hesitated before firing, in the way conversations died when officers walked by, in the increasing number of equipment malfunctions that prevented weapons from firing when they should have. Private Jackson approached me one night after a particularly brutal engagement. We'd overrun a Kitharon medical facility, or what we thought was a medical facility. It turned out to be something like a nursery filled with Kitharon young. The brass called it a military training ground, but the truth was obvious to anyone with eyes. "Sergeant," Jackson said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we killed children today, didn't we?" I looked at the kid because that's what he was, just a kid himself, and saw something breaking behind his eyes. The same thing that had broken in all of us, one atrocity at a time. "Yes," I said, "we did. But they told us. They told us a lot of things, Jackson. Most of them were lies." He was quiet for a long time after that. When he spoke again, his voice was different, older, sadder. "What are we supposed to do with that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I wish I did." War changes you. But I was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, it was changing me in the right direction, because every time I saw her on the battlefield, and I was seeing her more often now, as if fate kept throwing us together, I felt less like a soldier and more like someone who'd stumbled onto a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. The Kitharon weren't the monsters in this war. We were. The battle that changed everything happened in a world whose name I never learned. Command just called it Target 7, another rock to be taken, held, and stripped of anything useful before moving on to the next one. This one was different, though. The planet was alive in ways that defied explanation. Massive fungal networks covered the surface like a web, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to our presence. The air itself felt thick with intention, as if the world was watching us, judging us. When we first made planetfall, the fungal networks glowed brighter. Not hostile exactly, but aware, like the planet was trying to communicate with us. Some of the men swore they could feel emotions in the patterns of light, curiosity, concern, something that might have been welcome. Dr. Sarah Voss, our xenobiology specialist, was fascinated. She spent hours studying the fungal networks, taking samples and running tests. Her preliminary reports suggested that the entire planet might be a single organism, a living entity of unimaginable size and complexity. "The neural pathways are incredible," she told me as we prepared for the assault. "This thing might be more intelligent than all of humanity combined." "Does Command know about this?" Her expression darkened. I filed my reports. They were classified and buried. The operation proceeds as planned. The Kitharon had been there first. Their structures, grown rather than built, rose from the fungal mat like crystalline trees, beautiful organic architecture that seemed to breathe with the planet's rhythm. The buildings pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns as the fungal networks, as if they were part of the same organism. Our orders were simple: destroy it all. Alien contamination, the briefing called it. Biological warfare preparations. But when I saw those structures up close, all I could think was that we were about to destroy something irreplaceable, something sacred. The Kitharon structures weren't military installations. They were homes, art galleries, places of learning and contemplation. Through the translucent walls, I could see alien families going about their daily lives. Children playing games I didn't understand. Elders taught young ones to sing harmonies that made the crystal walls resonate. It was a civilization, not an army, not a weapons facility, but a living, breathing culture that had learned to build in harmony with the world around them, and we were going to burn it all down. The orbital bombardment started at 0600 hours. I watched from the dropship as streams of fire fell from the sky, turning the alien city into a blazing wound on the planet's surface. The fungal networks recoiled from the impact points, withering and blackening as if in pain. And maybe they were. Maybe the whole planet was screaming, and we were just too deaf to hear it. Dr. Voss was crying as we descended toward the surface. "This is murder," she whispered. "We're committing genocide." "Keep your voice down, Doc," I warned her. "That kind of talk will get you court-martialed." "Good," she said. "At least then I won't have to watch this anymore." We landed in what used to be the city centre. The air was thick with smoke and the sickly sweet smell of burning organic matter. My boots squelched through puddles of something that might have been blood or tree sap. I didn't want to know which. The fungal network was dying. The bioluminescent patterns that had once pulsed with life now flickered randomly, like the final neural firings of a brain shutting down. Entire sections of the network had gone dark, leaving dead zones that would probably never recover. We were killing a planet, not just the Kitharon who lived on it, but the world itself. That's when the counterattack came. The Kitharon emerged from the ruins like ghosts, their forms blending with the smoke and shadows. But this wasn't a coordinated military assault. This was desperate, chaotic, the actions of people who'd just watched their home burn. They fought with a fury I'd never seen before, not the calculated precision of professional soldiers, but the wild desperation of people defending their families. Some of them weren't even armed with proper weapons. They'd grabbed tools, improvised explosives, anything that might hurt the invaders who'd destroyed their world. I was separated from my squad in the first minutes of fighting. A Kitharon plasma grenade had collapsed the bridge I was crossing, sending me tumbling into a ravine filled with the twisted remains of their organic architecture. By the time I dug myself out, the sounds of battle had moved on, leaving me alone in the wreckage. That's when I saw her again. She was kneeling beside one of the destroyed structures, her hands pressed against what looked like a dying tree, but which I realized was some kind of habitat. Through the translucent bark, I could see smaller forms. Kitharon young, I realized with a sick feeling in my stomach. Children. They were all dead. She wasn't wearing her armor anymore. Instead, she was dressed in simple civilian clothes, flowing robes that seemed to be made from the same organic material as the buildings. Her weapon lay forgotten on the ground beside her, and she was singing the same mournful harmonies I'd heard on Vorthak Prime, but sadder now, a lullaby for the dead. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her weapon forgotten on the ground beside her. For the first time since this war began, I was close enough to really see her face, the angular features, the metallic sheen of her skin, the way her eyes reflected light like mirrors. But more than that, I could see the expression she wore. Grief. Pure, undiluted grief that transcended species. Tears, actual tears, streamed down her face. The same transparent fluid that humans cried, falling from eyes that looked more human than alien, despite their mirror-bright surface. I had my rifle raised, finger on the trigger. She was unarmed, vulnerable. One shot would end one of their most effective field commanders. It would be a significant victory for humanity. I couldn't do it. Instead, I lowered my weapon and asked the question that had been burning in my mind for months. Why? She tilted her head, studying me with those mirror-bright eyes. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through crystal chimes, alien, but somehow musical. Your words, I know a few. Her English was broken, accented in ways that hurt to hear, but understandable. Why what? Why do you keep sparing me? Every battle, you could have killed me. Why don't you? She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from my face to the weapon in my hands, then back to the dead habitat behind her. When she looked at me again, something had changed in her expression. "You ask why?" I asked the same. She gestured to the destruction around us. "You burn our gardens, kill our children, but you hesitate. Why?" I didn't have an answer, or rather, I had an answer I wasn't ready to admit, even to myself. She stood slowly, gracefully, her movements still fluid despite her obvious exhaustion. Up close, I could see that she was wounded. A deep gash along her left arm leaked luminous fluid that I assumed was blood. Burns from human plasma weapons marked her side. She should have been in a medical facility, not mourning in the ruins of her home. "This place," she said, gesturing to the devastation around us, "was my birth nest, where I learned to sing, where my offspring would have grown." Offspring, children, young ones. They were to be born next cycle. Her hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, and I realized with a shock that she was pregnant, or had been. The trauma of the bombardment, the stress of the battle. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Sorry." She repeated the word carefully, as if testing its weight. "Is good word, but does not bring back the dead." The sound of approaching human voices cut through our conversation. My squad was coming, probably following my transponder signal. In minutes, they'd find us here, and then there would be no choice but violence. She heard them too. Her hand moved toward her weapon, then stopped. Instead, she reached into a pouch on her belt and pulled out something small and crystalline, a data chip maybe, or some kind of recording device. "Your people, my people, we do not understand." She pressed the object into my hand, her fingers briefly touching mine. Her skin was warm, I realized with surprise. Not cold metal, but living flesh. "Maybe you understand." The crystal pulsed with inner light, warm against my palm. For just a moment I felt something, an echo of emotion that wasn't my own. Sadness, yes, but also hope. A desperate belief that understanding was still possible, even in the midst of such destruction. "What is this?" I asked. "Truth," she said simply. "What your leaders do not tell you, what mine try to hide. Maybe you see, maybe you help others see." Then she was gone, vanishing into the smoke like she'd never been there at all. By the time my squad found me, I was alone with the dead and a crystalline chip that hummed with alien energy. "Sergeant Chen," Private Jackson's voice crackled through the comm. "Are you injured? We lost your signal when the building collapsed." "I'm fine," I said, pocketing the crystal. "Just got turned around in the smoke." "Orders are to regroup at the landing zone. Command wants a full sweep of the area before we move on to the next target." Another target. Another world to burn. Another chance to destroy something beautiful and irreplaceable in the name of human expansion. That night, in my bunk aboard the transport ship, I activated the chip. What I saw changed everything I thought I knew about this war. Images flooded my mind, not visual recordings, but memories. Kitharon memories. I saw their homeworld before the war, a planet of living cities and singing forests. I saw families, communities, art and culture that rivaled anything humanity had ever created. I saw them receiving the first reports of human expansion into their territory, the debates in their councils about how to respond. They hadn't wanted war. They'd tried to make contact, to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. But every attempt at communication had been interpreted as a threat by human command. Every peaceful gesture had been seen as preparation for attack. I saw the first human settlements in Kitharon space, mining operations that destroyed sacred sites, industrial complexes that poisoned entire ecosystems. I saw the Kitharon watching in horror as worlds they'd spent centuries nurturing were stripped bare in a matter of months. And then I saw their decision to fight back, not from aggression or hatred, but from desperate necessity. They were trying to protect what remained of their civilization from a species that seemed bent on destroying everything it touched. We'd started this war, not them. US. The memories kept coming. I saw the orbital bombardment of the first Kitharon city from their perspective, the terror of civilians who'd never seen weapons of such destructive power. I saw families torn apart, children orphaned, elders who'd lived for centuries reduced to ash in minutes. I saw her, the alien commander, arguing with her own military leaders, advocating for restraint, for mercy, for the possibility that some humans might be reasoned with. She'd been overruled, but she'd continued to fight with as much compassion as possible in a war that seemed designed to crush all compassion. And when I finally understood that truth, I also understood why she kept sparing me. She was hoping I'd figure it out on my own. She was hoping that understanding might save us all. The chip changed everything, not just what I knew about the war, but how I saw it. Every human victory felt like participating in a genocide. Every dead Kithaeron was someone's family member, someone's friend, someone's child, but I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? And even if they did, what could we do? Desert? Mutiny? The war machine was too big, too entrenched. Individuals like me were just cogs in a mechanism designed to grind entire civilizations to dust. So I kept fighting. But now, every time I pulled the trigger, I died a little inside. The next few engagements were brutal affairs on worlds that had never known war before we brought it to them. Command was pushing harder now, trying to end the conflict before public opinion back home turned against the military leadership. That meant fewer prisoners, less discrimination between military and civilian targets, and orders that made my skin crawl. I started keeping a journal, not of military operations, that would have been suicidal if discovered, but of small things. Details that the official reports missed or deliberately omitted, the way Kithaeron civilians tried to shield their young during bombardments, the precision with which their warriors avoided unnecessary casualties, the way they sang when they thought no one was listening. Private Jackson noticed the change in me first. We were preparing for another assault, this time on a Kithaeron agricultural world, when he approached me with a concerned expression. "Sergeant, are you all right? You seem different lately." "Different how?" "Quieter, more careful, like you're thinking about things you didn't used to think about." I studied the kid's face. He was barely 20, but the war had aged him years in months. The bright-eyed recruit who'd peppered me with questions was gone, replaced by someone who'd seen too much, done too much. "Jackson, have you ever wondered if we're fighting the right war?" He glanced around nervously, checking to make sure no officers were within earshot. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The things we see out there, they don't match what they tell us in the briefings." "What kind of things?" "Well, yesterday during the raid on that supply depot, I saw a Kithaeron medic treating one of our wounded. One of theirs got to him first, but instead of finishing him off, she was trying to save his life." I nodded, slowly. "Did you report it?" "I tried to. Lieutenant Martinez said I must have been confused by the alien's appearance. Wrote it up as an attempted torture session." We were quiet for a moment, both of us thinking about the implications. If Jackson was seeing the same things I was, maybe others were too. Maybe the truth was becoming too obvious to hide. I saw her in every battle, and gradually, impossibly, we began to communicate. It started with small gestures. A hand signal warning me about a trap my squad was walking into. A shot that deliberately missed, creating cover instead of casualties. Moments of recognition across the chaos that slowly built into something like trust. The first time we actually spoke was during a skirmish on the outskirts of a Kithaeron research facility. I'd been separated from my unit again. It was becoming a habit that my commanding officers were starting to notice, and found myself pinned down by crossfire from both sides. She appeared beside me with the same fluid grace I'd come to expect, her weapon trained not on me but on the human forces that were about to overrun our position. "Duck," she said in her musical accent, and I hit the ground just as she opened fire. Her shots were surgical in their precision. She disabled weapons, destroyed cover, created chaos in the human ranks without killing a single soldier. In the confusion, my own forces fell back, leaving us alone in the abandoned facility. "Why did you help me?" I asked when the shooting stopped. "You ask many questions," she replied, but there was something like amusement in her voice. "It is a curious trait for soldiers." "Is that a bad thing?" "No. Is a hopeful thing. Soldiers who ask questions sometimes find better answers than those who only follow orders. She was studying me with those mirror-bright eyes, and I could feel her evaluating something, testing whether I could be trusted with whatever she was thinking. "My name is Veltara," she said finally. "Means songkeeper in my language. Was teacher before war, taught young ones to harmonize with living worlds." "I'm Marcus Chen." I hesitated, then added, "I was an engineer before the military. I built things instead of destroying them." "Better profession," she said, with what might have been a smile. "Building is harder than destroying. Requires hope." During the siege of Korath Station, a Kitharon research facility that took us 3 days to overrun, I found her wounded in a collapsed laboratory. Her left arm was badly damaged, leaking the luminous fluid that served as her blood. She was trying to destroy databanks when I found her, working with desperate efficiency despite her injury. I should have called for backup, should have taken her prisoner. Instead, I helped her finish the job. "Why do you destroy your own data?" I asked as we worked together to purge the alien computers. "Not weapons," she said, her English improving with each conversation. "Gardens, how to grow, how to sing life into dead worlds." She looked at me with those mirror eyes. "Your people will make weapons from this, will turn gift of life into tools of death." I understood. We'd been doing it throughout the war, taking Kitharon biotechnology and twisting it into increasingly horrific instruments of destruction, the chemical weapons that turned their own healing gardens against them, the bioviruses that specifically targeted Kitharon genetics, the corruption of everything beautiful they'd created. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "You... different," she said, her hand briefly touching mine as we reached for the same data core. "Not like others, you see." "See what?" "Truth. That we are not so different." She was right. The more time I spent talking with her, and it was becoming a regular occurrence now, these brief encounters in the aftermath of battles, the more I realized how similar our species were. We both valued family, art, the preservation of beauty in a hostile universe. We both mourned our dead and feared for our children's future. The only difference was that her people had learned to build instead of destroy, to grow instead of consume, to sing life into existence instead of burning it away, and we were killing them for it. Our conversations became longer, more complex. She taught me words in her language, not the harsh military commands that human intelligence had recorded, but the flowing poetry her people used to describe beauty, growth, harmony. I shared stories of earth, of forests and oceans and creatures that lived without the constant threat of war. "Your homeworld sounds like old songs," she said during one of our meetings, hidden in the ruins of what had once been a Kitharon library. Before the burning started, we had such places, worlds where children could grow without learning to fight. "What happened to them?" "War came, as it always does." Her voice carried a sadness that seemed to span generations. "My people have fought many times before. Always we tell ourselves it is the last time. Always we are wrong." I learned her full name during the battle for Yeth Prime, Veltara Jindol, which meant something like Songkeeper of the Growing Darkness. She was a bioharmonist, part scientist, part artist, part warrior, someone who used sound and biological manipulation to heal as well as harm. She'd joined the military not out of aggression, but because her people were dying and someone had to protect the survivors. "Your name?" she asked me as we sheltered in a bombed-out Kitharon nursery, waiting for a human patrol to pass. The walls around us were covered with what looked like children's artwork, swirling patterns that seemed to move in the dim light. "Marcus Chen." "Marcus." She pronounced it carefully, like it was a song. "It means what?" "Nothing good," I said, thinking of all the violence I'd done wearing that name. "Nothing worth repeating." "In my language would be Martek, means one who tends the wounds. Is better name, yes?" I almost smiled at that. Despite everything, the war, the death, the impossibility of our situation, she was trying to give me hope, to suggest that maybe I could be something other than what this conflict had made me. She showed me images stored in her personal data crystals, her life before the war, teaching young Kitharon to harmonize with the biological systems that sustained their cities. Gardens that responded to song, buildings that grew instead of being constructed, art forms that existed at the intersection of science and music. "We are not warriors by nature," she explained as we watched her memories play out in holographic light. "We learn to fight because we must, but it is not, how do you say, our first choice. Then why fight at all? Why not just leave, find empty worlds, start over? Because leaving means letting you destroy what we cannot replace. Sacred sites where our ancestors sang the first songs, worlds that took centuries to heal after the old wars, things that are part of our souls." I began to understand the scope of what we were really fighting over. This wasn't just about territory or resources. For the Kitharon, we were destroying their history, their identity, their connection to something larger than themselves. "We tried to speak with your leaders," she continued. "Many times, at the beginning, sent envoys tried to establish communication. Your military interpreted every gesture as aggression." "What kind of gestures?" "Songs. We tried to teach your people to hear the harmonies that connect living systems. We thought if you understood how worlds truly work, you would not want to destroy them." She showed me recordings of those first contact attempts. Kitharon envoys approaching human settlements with empty hands, singing complex harmonies that seemed to make the very air vibrate with meaning. To human ears, untrained in the subtleties of bioacoustic communication, it must have sounded like battle cries. The human response had been swift and brutal: orbital bombardment, followed by ground assault, followed by complete destruction of the Kitharon settlement. No prisoners taken, no attempt at communication, just extermination. "That was when we knew," Veltara said, her voice heavy with old grief. "Your species does not hear the songs, does not understand that some things are more important than conquest." But there was hope in her voice too, a desperate belief that understanding was still possible. "You hear them though, the songs. I have seen you listening when the crystals sing." She was right. I'd started noticing the music that seemed to permeate Kitharon spaces. Not just their explicit songs, but the subtle harmonies created by their architecture, their technology, their very presence on a world. It was like they lived in constant, gentle collaboration with the universe around them. "Is that why you keep saving me?" I asked. "Because you think I might learn to hear what you hear? Is that why you keep letting me?" she countered. We were quiet for a long time after that, both of us thinking about the implications of what we were doing. Two soldiers from opposing sides meeting in secret, sharing truths that could get us both executed. "My commanders are beginning to ask questions," I told her during our next meeting, "about why I survive encounters when others don't, about why I seem to know where Kitharon forces will be. Mine as well. They think perhaps I have grown too fond of certain human targets." The word "fond" hung in the air between us, carrying implications neither of us was ready to acknowledge. We were walking a line that grew thinner with each encounter, balanced between duty and something else. Something that had no name in the military vocabulary of either species. That night, as I lay in my bunk listening to the distant sounds of artillery, I made a decision that would have gotten me court-martialed if anyone had found out. I was going to find a way to end this war, not win it, end it, because the alternative was watching one of the most beautiful species in the galaxy go extinct because they'd gotten in the way of human expansion, and I was going to need Veltara's help to do it. The fragile connection between us was about to become something much more dangerous, a conspiracy that could save both our peoples or get us both killed trying. But first, we had to survive what was coming, because intelligence reports suggested that Command was planning something called Operation Final Symphony, a coordinated assault designed to end the war once and for all. I had a feeling that end the war meant something very different to Command than it did to me. Everything went to hell at the Battle of Nexus Secundus. Command had been developing something they called Project Reaper, a biological weapon specifically designed to target Kitharon genetics. They'd reverse-engineered it from captured biotechnology, the same healing arts that Veltara's people used to sing life into dead worlds, turned it into a virus that would literally dissolve Kitharon DNA from the inside out. The plan was to deploy it on Nexus Secundus, the largest Kitharon colony world. 20 million civilians, men, women, children, elders, an entire civilization wiped out in a matter of hours. I found out about it 3 days before deployment when I overheard Colonel Brass talking to his aide about acceptable losses and final solutions. The casual way he discussed genocide made me want to put my sidearm to his head and pull the trigger. The weapon is designed for maximum psychological impact, Brass was saying as I lurked outside his office, pretending to check requisition forms. Complete genetic breakdown takes approximately 6 hours, long enough for the targets to understand what's happening to them. Sir, won't this constitute a violation of the Terran Convention on Biological Warfare? The convention applies to human combatants, Lieutenant. These creatures aren't covered under human law. But sir, they're clearly sentient. That's enough, Lieutenant. Your job is to follow orders, not question policy. I walked away from that conversation knowing that I had to act. Not as a soldier, not as a human, but as someone who'd seen too much to pretend ignorance was an excuse. The question was how. Human communications were monitored, and any attempt to contact the enemy would trigger immediate arrest and execution. But I'd been studying Kitharon biotechnology in my spare time, trying to understand how their organic computers worked. Their communication networks weren't electronic. They were biological, using modified organisms to carry messages across interstellar distances. I spent the next 48 hours working in the medical bay, claiming to research treatment for a respiratory infection that was spreading through the ranks. What I was actually doing was synthesizing a basic message organism using medical supplies from the infirmary. Crude work, but functional. The message was simple: Reaper coming, Nexus Secundus, 3 days. Evacuate now, -M. The hardest part was releasing it without being detected. I waited until we were conducting a routine patrol near a Kitharon outpost, then released the organism during what appeared to be a minor firefight. In the chaos, no one noticed one more biological anomaly among all the others. 2 days later, Nexus Secundus was empty. The Kitharon had evacuated the entire planet in 36 hours. 20 million people gone like smoke, leaving behind empty cities and functioning infrastructure, but no targets for our genocide weapon. Command was furious, launching investigation after investigation to find the leak, but they never suspected the broken-down infantry sergeant who'd been showing signs of combat fatigue for months. The briefing after the failed operation was brutal. Admiral Hayes, the overall military commander, looked like she'd aged years in the span of hours. Her usual composure was cracked, showing the desperate fury underneath. "Someone warned them," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Someone with access to classified operations, someone in this room." The assembled officers shifted nervously. I kept my expression neutral, the same mask of professional competence I'd worn for months. "Sir," Colonel Brass spoke up, "intelligence suggests the aliens may have developed some form of precognitive ability. It would explain their tactical prescience." "Precognitive ability?" Hayes' voice dripped with skepticism. "You're suggesting they can see the future?" "It's the only explanation that makes sense. How else could they know to evacuate at exactly the right time?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Rather than acknowledge that someone in their own ranks might have developed a conscience, they were willing to believe in alien psychic powers. The retaliation was swift and brutal. If the Kitharon had been holding back before, they weren't anymore. They hit our supply lines, our communication relays, our rear echelon support bases. Targets that had been safe throughout the war suddenly became battlegrounds. It was as if they'd decided that if we wanted total war, they'd give us total war, but they were still trying to minimize casualties. Even in their rage, even with the knowledge that we'd been planning to exterminate them, they were more merciful than we were. The change in their tactics was subtle but significant. Where before they'd focused on disabling our weapons and vehicles, now they targeted our ability to wage war itself. Fuel depots were contaminated with biological agents that made the fuel unusable but harmless to humans. Communications arrays were infected with organic viruses that disrupted signals without damaging equipment. Supply ships found their cargo holds filled with rapidly growing vines that made the goods inaccessible but left the crews unharmed. It was biological warfare but conducted with an artist's precision. They were trying to end our ability to fight without ending our ability to live. I saw Veltara during the evacuation of Firebase Echo, a forward operating base that the Kitharon overran in less than 6 hours. Our forces were in full retreat, abandoning equipment and wounded alike in their panic to escape. I was helping to carry a wounded private to the evacuation zone when I saw her across the compound. She was standing over a group of human prisoners, her weapon lowered, protecting them from other Kitharon warriors who wanted revenge for Nexus Secundus. Even now, even after everything we'd done, she was choosing mercy over vengeance. Our eyes met across the chaos and she nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that said everything. She knew what I'd done. She knew I'd saved her people. But the war wasn't over. If anything, it was getting worse. Command deployed Reaper anyway on a smaller Kitharon outpost called Velthanis. I watched the footage in the briefing room, trying not to vomit as the weapon did its work. Kitharon bodies simply dissolving, melting from the inside out, screaming in harmonies that would haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. The weapon worked exactly as designed. The victims had 6 hours to understand what was happening to them before death finally came. 6 hours of watching their own bodies betray them, of singing death songs for themselves and their families, of knowing that their killers were too cowardly to face them directly. Velthanis had a population of 50,000. I watched it all, forced myself to watch, to remember every detail, every moment of agony, because forgetting would have been another betrayal, another way of pretending that I wasn't complicit in this atrocity. After that, something broke in me. I couldn't pretend anymore that I was fighting for the good guys, couldn't tell myself that I was just following orders, just doing my duty. I was part of a machine designed to commit xenocide, and every day I didn't act against it made me complicit in genocide. The psychological evaluations started a week later. Command had noticed the increasing number of soldiers suffering from what they termed combat stress reactions. Men and women who'd seen too much, done too much, lost too much faith in the cause to function as effective killers. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, the fleet psychologist, conducted my interview in a sterile white room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Sergeant Chen, your commanding officers report that you've been experiencing mood changes, difficulty concentrating, and what they describe as philosophical questioning of military objectives. I've been thinking about the war, yes, ma'am. Thinking in what way? Wondering if we're winning anything worth having. She made notes on her pad, her expression professionally neutral. The enemy has been conducting psychological warfare operations designed to create exactly these kinds of doubts. Exposure to their bioacoustic weapons can cause depression, existential anxiety, even a form of Stockholm syndrome where human personnel begin to identify with enemy combatants. Is that what you think is happening to me? I think you've been under tremendous stress for an extended period. I think you've seen things that would challenge anyone's mental stability, and I think the enemy may be exploiting those natural human responses. She prescribed medication, little white pills that were supposed to suppress doubt, enhance aggression, make killing easier. I took them but didn't swallow them, added them to a growing collection hidden in my personal effects. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to defect, not to the enemy. There was no enemy anymore, just two groups of people caught in a spiral of violence that would end only when one side was extinct. I was going to find Veltara and propose something that had never been tried before, a joint operation to end this war from the inside. It was treason. It was suicide. It was probably hopeless. But it was the only thing I could do and still look at myself in the mirror. The opportunity came during the assault on Kitharon Command Station Alpha, a massive orbital facility that served as the hub for their military operations. If we could take it, the war would effectively be over. If they could hold it, they might have enough time to develop countermeasures to Reaper and turn the tide. I volunteered for the boarding party, and somewhere in the maze of organic corridors and living walls that made up the station, I was going to find Veltara and ask her to help me save both our species, even if it killed us both in the process. Kitharon Command Station Alpha was like nothing I'd ever seen. The humans built their ships and stations from metal and ceramic, all hard angles and functional design, but this was art. Living architecture that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, corridors that curved and flowed like the interior of some massive organism, walls that seemed to breathe with their own rhythm. It was beautiful, and we were there to destroy it. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small city, spinning slowly in the void around a dying red giant. Its organic hull caught and reflected the star's crimson light, making the entire structure glow like a living ember. As our assault ships approached, I could see smaller vessels moving around it, Kitharon defenders preparing for what they knew would be their final battle. The boarding action was chaos from the start. Kitharon defenders fought with a desperation I'd never seen before. They knew this was their last stand, their final chance to protect what remained of their civilization. Our assault teams took massive casualties in the first hour, but we kept pushing deeper into the station's core. The interior defenses were unlike anything in human military doctrine. Instead of automated weapons and energy barriers, the Kitharon had bioengineered guardians, creatures that seemed part plant, part animal, all deadly. They moved through the organic corridors like antibodies through a bloodstream, seeking out and neutralizing the human infection. But there was beauty, even in their lethality. The Guardian creatures were graceful in their violence, their movements choreographed like a dance. They killed efficiently, but without cruelty, ending threats quickly rather than prolonging suffering. I'd separated from my unit during the fighting, using the confusion to search for Veltara. She'd be in the command center, I was certain of it. If this was their last stronghold, she'd be there helping to coordinate their defense. The station's interior was a maze of organic passages that seemed to shift and change when you weren't looking directly at them. Bioluminescent guides along the walls pulsed in patterns that might have been navigation aids or might have been some kind of language. I followed them deeper into the structure, past chambers filled with what looked like crystalline trees and pools of luminous liquid. The deeper I went, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just a military installation. It was a repository of Kitharon culture, a living library containing the accumulated knowledge and art of their civilization. The walls were covered with bioluminescent murals that told stories in light and motion. Alcoves held crystalline sculptures that sang when exposed to the station's ambient energy. We were destroying a museum, a university, a cathedral of knowledge that had taken centuries to grow. I found her in what had to be the station's heart, a vast spherical chamber where streams of data flowed through biological conduits like rivers of light. She was connected to the network through tendrils that emerged from the walls. Her consciousness merged with the station's living computer system, managing the defense, coordinating evacuations, trying to save as many of her people as possible. When she saw me, the tendrils retracted with a wet sound that made my stomach turn. Her face was pale, or whatever passed for pale in someone with metallic skin, and I could see exhaustion in every line of her body. "Marcus," she said, and despite everything, she almost smiled. "You find me again?" "I need to talk to you," I said, glancing around the chamber. We were alone for the moment, but that wouldn't last long. About ending this war. "War ends when one side is dead," she said simply. "Your people made choice. Reaper weapon. You choose extinction over peace. Not all of us chose that. Some of us want something different." "You? You want something different?" "I want to stop the killing. Both sides. Before there's nothing left to save." Veltara studied me with those mirror-bright eyes, and I could see her weighing possibilities, calculating odds. Around us, the data streams pulsed with urgent information. battle reports, casualty figures, evacuation status updates, the death of her civilization measured in packets of light. Finally, she nodded. "What do you propose?" I told her my plan. It was desperate, probably impossible, but it was the only chance I could see. We needed to take out the command structures of both sides simultaneously, cripple their ability to wage war long enough for cooler heads to prevail. I had access to human military communications, knowledge of our command protocols. She had the same for her people. "Mutual destruction," she said when I finished. "You ask me to help you destroy my own command structure. I'm asking you to help me save what's left of both our peoples." "Is treason," she said finally. "Yes. Will likely fail. Probably will definitely get us killed. Almost certainly." She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving to the streams of data flowing around us. Information about the battle raging outside, casualty reports, evacuation status updates. The death of her civilization measured in packets of light. "Your people have saying, yes, about hope?" "Several of them. Mine have one also. Song continues even when singer dies." She looked at me again. "If we try this, if we fail, maybe someone else continues song." Before I could respond, the chamber's entrance exploded inward. Human assault troops poured through the breach, weapons raised, ready to kill anything that moved. They saw me first, one of their own, and hesitated just long enough for me to realize what was about to happen. They were going to execute Veltara, right here, right now, while I watched. "Wait!" I shouted, stepping between them and her. "She's surrendering. She's got intelligence we need." The squad leader, a sergeant I didn't recognize, kept his weapon trained on Veltara. "Stand aside, soldier. Orders are to eliminate all hostiles." "She's not hostile. She's surrendering." "Look around you, Chen." His voice was hard, professional. "This is their command center. She's probably their highest-ranking officer on the station. Command wants all senior leadership eliminated. She has information about their weapon systems, their defensive capabilities. We need her alive. Move aside or be considered complicit with the enemy." I looked back at Veltara, saw the resignation in her eyes. She knew how this was going to end, had probably known from the moment she'd agreed to help me, but she nodded anyway, a small gesture that meant more than any words could have. The explosion came without warning. Kitharon defenders had breached the chamber from another entrance, their weapons already firing. The human assault team scattered, seeking cover behind the organic pillars and data conduits. In the chaos of the firefight, I lost sight of Veltara. When I found her again, she was down. A human plasma round had caught her in the chest, burning through her armor and deep into the tissue beneath. Luminous fluid, her blood was spreading in a pool around her body. I dragged her behind cover, pulling emergency medical supplies from my kit. But even as I worked to seal the wound, I could see it was too late. The damage was too extensive, too deep. The plasma had burned through vital organs, and her body's own bioluminescent systems were failing. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of battle. "Don't talk. Save your strength. No. Listen." She pressed something into my hand. Another data chip, this one glowing with urgent patterns. "Command codes. Both sides. Do what we planned." "I can't do it without you." "Yes, you can." Her hand found mine, squeezed weakly. "Song continues. Remember." The battle was moving away from us now, both sides pushing toward other objectives. In the sudden quiet, I could hear her breathing growing shallower, more labored. "Why?" I asked the question that had been haunting me since the first time we met. "Why did you trust me? Why risk everything for someone you barely knew?" She was quiet for so long I thought she'd lost consciousness. Then, in a voice like wind through broken crystal, "Because you saw us. Not as monsters, as people." She smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. Was enough. Her eyes began to dim, the mirror-bright surface losing its reflective quality. But she wasn't finished yet. "My people will remember you." Songkeeper Chen, one who tended wounds even in time of war. Veltara, use codes. Save who you can. Make peace. Worth the price. She died holding my hand, her mirror-bright eyes finally going dark. And in that moment, I understood what I had to do. The war was going to end, not with victory or defeat, but with truth, even if it killed me too. I used Veltara's command codes that same day. The Kitharon network accepted my access because her authentication was still valid. Apparently, their systems took time to register the death of a bioharmonist. I transmitted shutdown orders to their entire military fleet, disabling weapons and engines across hundreds of ships. Simultaneously, I used my own command access to inject a virus into human communications, one that would gradually degrade our ability to coordinate attacks. Both sides found themselves suddenly unable to wage war effectively. Ships drifted powerless, communication networks failed, supply lines collapsed. The killing stopped, not because anyone chose peace, but because no one could figure out how to continue fighting. The ceasefire that followed wasn't negotiated. It was simply the exhausted pause of two civilizations that had temporarily lost the ability to destroy each other. I was arrested 3 hours after the networks went down. Military intelligence had traced the sabotage back to my access codes, and they found Veltara's data chip in my possession. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The holding cell was a sterile cube of metal and ceramic, designed to prevent escape or suicide. They kept me isolated for weeks while they prepared their case, the only human contact coming from interrogators who asked the same questions over and over. Why did you betray your own species? Who else was involved? How long had you been working with the enemy? I told them the truth, which they refused to believe, that I'd acted alone, that my only contact with the Kitharon had been a series of chance encounters with a single individual, that I'd committed treason not to serve an enemy, but to save two species from mutual annihilation. Sergeant Chen, Admiral Hayes said during one of our sessions, you've crippled the war effort of your own species. Thousands of human soldiers will die because of your actions. Thousands of soldiers on both sides will live because of my actions. You don't know that. I know that Reaper was designed to kill 20 million civilians. I know that we were planning to deploy it on every Kitharon world. I know that we've been committing genocide and calling it liberation. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying me with eyes that held more pain than anger. Do you understand what you've done? You've prolonged this war. Without decisive victory, this conflict could drag on for decades, or it could end. For the first time since it started, both sides have to actually talk to each other instead of just shooting. The court-martial was swift and thorough. Treason, collaboration with the enemy, sabotage of military operations, charges that carried the death penalty in wartime. I didn't bother with a defense. How do you explain that you committed treason to save two species from mutual extinction? How do you make them understand that sometimes the enemy is the only one telling the truth? But something unexpected happened during the proceedings. The forced ceasefire had given people time to think, to question, to look at what the war had really accomplished. News of Reaper started leaking to civilian media. Stories emerged about Kitharon attempts at peaceful contact that had been suppressed by military command. Public opinion began to shift. Dr. Sarah Voss, the xenobiology specialist from Target 7, testified at my trial. She'd been court-martialed herself for refusing to participate in the development of biological weapons, but her expertise gave weight to her words. The Kitharon are not the aggressors in this conflict, she told the military tribunal. Every piece of evidence I've seen suggests they've been fighting a defensive war from the beginning. We destroyed their sacred sites, poisoned their worlds, and when they tried to communicate with us, we interpreted every gesture as an act of war. The prosecution objected, claiming her testimony was irrelevant to my guilt or innocence, but the damage was done. The media had picked up the story, and suddenly everyone was asking uncomfortable questions about how the war had really started. Private Jackson, now a corporal, also testified on my behalf. He described the things he'd seen on the battlefield: Kitharon medics treating human wounded, civilians trying to protect their young, warriors who fought with precision designed to minimize casualties rather than maximize them. Sergeant Chen saved my life more than once, he told the court. But more than that, he saved my soul. He helped me see that we were becoming monsters, and he showed me that it was still possible to choose to be human. The war ended not with my execution, but with my commutation to life imprisonment. Both governments, what was left of them, agreed to formal peace negotiations. The Kitharon revealed the locations of their surviving populations, scattered across hidden worlds and mobile fleets. Humanity acknowledged that first contact had been catastrophically mishandled. The negotiations took 2 years. I followed them from my cell, reading sanitized reports that bore little resemblance to the truth. The official version spoke of mutual misunderstandings and communication failures. No mention of genocide, no acknowledgement of war crimes, just a polite fiction that allowed both sides to save face. But underneath the diplomatic language, real change was happening. Kitharon bioharmonists began working with human scientists to develop new forms of sustainable technology. Human engineers learned to build in harmony with living systems rather than in opposition to them. Slowly, carefully, 2 species began to learn from each other. I was released after 5 years as part of the final peace treaty. The galaxy I emerged into was a different place. Human and Kitharon colonies existed side by side now, trading technology and culture. Mixed research stations studied bioharmonics and quantum engineering. Children of both species learned each other's languages in integrated schools. It was everything Veltara and I had hoped for, everything she'd died to make possible. But I never felt like celebrating. You see, they gave me a medal when I got out. Recognition for my instrumental role in ending the war and establishing lasting peace. Politicians made speeches about my courage and sacrifice. They called me a hero. I threw the medal away the same day they gave it to me, because the truth is, I was never a hero. I was just a soldier who'd been lucky enough to meet someone who showed me what we were really fighting for. And when the time came to choose between duty and decency, I'd chosen the thing that let me sleep at night. But I'd been too late, too slow to act, too willing to follow orders even when I knew they were wrong. Veltara died because I'd spent months building up the courage to do what she'd been ready to do from the beginning. I settled on a colony world called Haven, on the edge of space where the war felt like ancient history. Mixed population, human and Kitharon families building something new together. The architecture was a blend of both species' styles, human engineering providing structure, Kitharon bioharmonics providing life and beauty. I found work as a teacher, helping children understand the galaxy they would inherit, a galaxy where humans and Kitharon coexisted in careful peace. My students were fascinated by my war stories, but I kept those carefully sanitized. They heard about brave soldiers and difficult choices, but not about the genocide we'd almost committed. I never told them about her. The official histories mention a Kitharon collaborator who helped end the war, but they don't use her name. Don't talk about her music, her dreams, her desperate hope that 2 species could learn to coexist. She's just a footnote in someone else's victory story. Sometimes, late at night when the colony is quiet and both moons are dark, I take out the last data chip she gave me, not the one with the command codes. I destroyed that years ago. The other one, the personal one she'd pressed into my hand during one of our early conversations. It contains her memories of home, the Kitharon homeworld before the war, before they'd been scattered across the galaxy as refugees. Cities that sang, forests that responded to music, oceans that glowed with bioluminescent art, a civilization that had learned to create beauty instead of weapons. We destroyed most of it. The Kitharon rebuilt what they could, but some things, once lost, can never be recovered. The war ended 23 years ago. Humanity and the Kitharon have built a peace that most experts say will last for generations. Trade is flourishing, technology is advancing, the galaxy is more prosperous than it's ever been. But sometimes I wonder what might have been possible if we'd met differently, if that first human expedition had landed with songs instead of weapons, if we'd learned to listen before we learned to fight. And every night I dream of mirror-bright eyes and wonder what she would have thought of the world we built on the foundation of her death. The war ended, but the question she left behind never did. Why did she trust me? Why did she believe that one broken soldier could make a difference? Why did she die for a species that had spent 3 years trying to exterminate hers? I'll never know the answers. But I keep asking the questions because in a universe that seems designed to reward cruelty and punish kindness, sometimes questions are the only things that keep you human. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think I can hear her singing the death songs of her people, the harmonies that once brought life to dead worlds. But maybe that's just my imagination, my mind trying to find meaning in the silence that follows every war. The galaxy is at peace now. Children play in integrated schools, scientists collaborate across species barriers, traders carry goods between human and Kitharon worlds. But peace, I've learned, is not the absence of war. It's the presence of justice. And justice for Veltara, for all the ones who died believing in something better, that's something I'll be working toward for the rest of my life, even if I never live to see it achieved. The song continues, even when the singer dies. She told me that once, and I'm beginning to understand what she meant. Her voice is gone, but the melody remains. And as long as there are people willing to listen, willing to learn, willing to choose hope over hatred, that melody will keep playing. It has to, because the alternative is a silence too terrible to bear.